All right. We before we kick off, any announcements from anybody that's club related, other than the obvious next event of May 15th? Not 22nd, May 15th.
Hoping for better weather than today, that's for sure. I'll tell you that.
It better be, but if it's going to be in May. But we know the same. We've got the posters that people can distribute them, and don't forget it'll be the usual. Other than making sure you have your social distance and your mask rules, it's our first big event of 2021.
Well, I can't believe it's April already. So, I mean, May is just, not that far off. I don't quite know what happened to March here, but been a little bit of a whirlwind. Well, in any event, so it's, yes, Carl, did you have some news?
No, I just said same weekend as Kutztown.
Well, we'll get a bigger crowd. I'm not worried. I don't know. I belong to the Philco forum, and there's a lot of back and forth about who's willing to go, not going, lots of different concerns. And so it sounds like there'll be a pretty good turnout. A lot of people are more on the yes side than the nay side, but we'll have to see what the reports are. I'll get some. There's a fellow down in the New Jersey club, Bob Bennett, who always does a very nice job. He's also a very good YouTube producer and videographer, so he always posts a little Kutztown special, so we can probably get a feel from him too, as far as I know he makes it every year, every time they have any kind of an event. So, and he made the last one. So anyway, happy April Fools, everybody. And so I guess that's why it snowed today in Greater Boston. And we have a little background noise, John, so I don't know where that's quite coming off of. If it's, you want to mute the group
here. I don't know if we're getting feedback. So I'm looking at most people, I'm not seeing much in the way of microphone indication. I guess what you could do is have everyone just try to mute for now, and let's see what happens, because I don't see anything obvious.
I see Lou has an open mic, but I don't see Lou, so I'm wondering if he's got something on. He's got enough radios.
I just had my.
Oh, there is Lou. Thank you.
I
didn't know if he had any one of those very nice looking radios turned on.
Well, let's see how it goes. It seems a little bit better now, but anyway, you were on, MC Paul.
All right. Well, I would like to, part of our Zooming, we run them twice a month, Mike, and part of our effort has been to reach out and find out what's going on in different radio clubs around the country. So we've visited with Jim Sargent from down in Texas, and we've met with some of the guys from Alabama, and we had a very nice presentation from California Historical Radio Society. That went great. So we thought we'd reach out to our Rocky Mountain friends and find out what's going on out in Colorado, because I know you guys have a pretty good club and have been at it for an awful long time. And from what I understand, it originally started out as Rocky Mountain Wireless Club or Society. So you have a long history out there. So being the president, why don't you just tell us a little bit, if you'd like to tell us, how did you even get involved in radio? Maybe first, Mike, and what drew you into all of this? And then how did you wind up as president out there?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to attend. And again, I mentioned earlier on that I've had internet trouble here over the last few days with Xfinity. They had a line cut just in our neighborhood here. So hopefully we have a good signal for the rest of the meeting and we don't have any additional interruptions. As for me, I grew up in middle Missouri, Midwest Missouri, and my grandfather influenced me quite a bit. He was an antique aficionado. He had a little antique store and bought and sold antiques, and it just so happened they lived on a lake, and so he also rented boat storage, sold bait, Coke, ice, typical lake property kind of setup. But it was the antiques that always kind of interested me. We'd go to auctions and local country auctions and that sort of thing. And my first radio was a Radiola 18. had a peerless speaker, and it was just the getting the cabinetry finished, getting the electronics to work, and so that's what kind of got me started. I'm an electrical engineer, and so I like tinkering with the old electronics and that sort of thing.
Pretty cool. So what
Yeah.
era, what years would you say that was that he was running the place on the lake, Mike?
Oh, gee, this was in the mid 60s, probably mid 60s through the mid 70s, something like that.
Now, did you ever, what kind of reception did you get? Did you ever hang out down there, stay for a few days?
Oh, yeah. Well, I grew up in that area.
Yeah.
We had a farm. So I grew up on a farm until I was probably, I don't know, 12, 13. And then my parents, we moved to Kansas City, a little bit bigger town. and so I ended up finishing, grammar school or high school there, and then went on to University of Missouri, and then ultimately got from there. So, yeah. Fun
Owning
with
all those Western Auto stores, no doubt, for all those True Tone radios.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you been a member of the Colorado Club in its current form?
Well, so I took out of college, I went to work for AT&T, and kind of got on the See America plan, moving from Kansas City to the East Coast, lived in Yardley, Pennsylvania for about 5 years, back to Chicago, did an international stint for several years, and back here in Denver, ultimately, in the, I guess right around the 96, something like that. And that's a few years after that's when I joined our local club here. So I've been with this club for 22 years, something like that, 24 years.
Oh, pretty cool.
Yeah.
What kind of membership do you guys have? About how many members currently?
Well, that's a good question. The last year has really been a challenge for the club. We've had a lot of outgoing expenses. We have a bi-monthly newsletter, and then and we usually funded that through auctions, through club meetings, membership fees, those kinds of things.
Sure. And
unfortunately, a lot of that has fallen off. We just haven't met in person since last March. Last March, a year ago, this past month was our last meeting for a full year. We did a few Zoom meetings. Some of the club members put advertisements for parts they need or radios that they're working on our website. So we're able to stay in contact that way. But we've had probably two or three Zoom meetings over the year period. And there's a small group, probably 6 or 8 members, that stay in contact weekly, kind of the core, membership, if you will.
Interesting, yeah. So yeah. I mean, I know it's affected a lot of the different clubs. Our neighbor down here to the south, Rich Lee, who sometimes joins us, is the president of the New Jersey Club. And, I'm on their little email chain there, and he just sent out, knowing him, it was a good-natured scathing, but, he was really going after folks who still get newsletters and still come to Zooms, but haven't been paying their dues. And, so just trying to stay, I think sometimes when folks don't feel if they're renting tables or coming to swap meets as obligated as they should. So,
yeah.
I'm sure you're not the only club who's up against that out there.
Yeah, we've had about half our members pay their dues. We have about 130 what I would call members. Now, how many of those have paid? Probably about 55 to 60.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
And so we have a very nice auction, and up until this past year, we have a very nice auction in the fall and September, and it's at a location where there's a barbecue pit, and so we tie it in with a club sponsored barbecue.
Oh,
We
very
furnish all the brats and hamburgers and Coke and different drinks, And then some of the members will bring side dishes, and we'll tie that in with the auction. And we'll run 200 to 300 items through the auction. It's about a 4-hour event.
That's pretty
Very
good.
cool. Now, is that the signature event for you guys once a year?
Yeah, it really is. That in our show, we have a show that we tie in with some other local Denver clubs, the Guitar Club. There's a Vintage Voltage sale, if you will. Different vendors around Colorado that have antique electronics. And so there's really 3 pieces to that weekend event. It's the Antique Radio Show, the Vintage Voltage sale of old electronics, and then the guitar show. And so those 3 things together in one event draw a lot of crowd here in the Rocky Mountain region.
That sounds like they all go pretty well together as well. So now on the auction, just to clarify that, so members would donate to the auction, proceeds to the club, that type of a thing?
Yeah, it's a 10% fee, 10% of the hammer
deal.
price. Yeah, go to the club. And
Oh,
that helps
that's
pay. That generally more than pays for the barbecue portion of the event.
Sure. Where do you guys have this program? Where do you? I know you said there's a barbecue pit there. Is it a camp facility or a hotel or with a?
One of our members worked. He's retired now. He worked for a company that built small airports. And so they have an engineering team there. They have construction guys that work out of this office. So it's a sole proprietor, and they have like an employee outdoor area. It's
Beautiful.
It has concrete pad with an overhang or a cover, and which under it is all the barbecue areas. So it's really a great venue for the type of thing that we do. And it doesn't cost us anything.
Well,
That's the beauty.
That's
Yeah.
Now, if we wanted to fly out on our New England Vintage Electronics Club Learjet and drop in there, could you guys accommodate?
We could make it happen. We could make it happen.
Maybe we just parachute drop. I think.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
That would solve a lot of our problems.
If you go to our website, you'll see pictures. We have record there of all of our past, the little bi-monthly pamphlet we put out called The Flash. You'll find copies of those all the way back to the 90s. And in it are auction results over the past 20 years of items that were for sale and sold with the pricing and that sort of thing. And you'll see pictures.
I'm sorry, probably give you some good idea of pricing sort of through the years as far as what certain things would command too.
It's amazing. It's amazing what things went for 10 years ago. It's just the hobby has suffered a little bit from pricing, at least out in our neck of the woods.
So you're seeing a weakening, Mike?
Yeah.
What percentage do you think it's gone down by?
Maybe, I don't know, maybe 25, 30%. Does that make sense? I mean,
I could believe it. I think it is. I think there's always going to be some items that will always be desirable, and will stay.
Oh, yeah.
But then other things that we used to pay a lot more 10 years ago. You probably agree. You probably lose a bit. Yeah.
Sorry for the noise in the background.
Oh, that's all right. I hear strong agreement.
Yeah. I happened to be at our last auction in September would that have been 90? No, it would have been in 2000, September 2000. And we had a family here in Denver donate several really nice radios. And one of them was a Zenith Walton. It needed some attention, to say the least. I didn't get it. And I think it went for like $900, something like that. I did though buy a RCA Theremin.
Oh.
And it was pretty rough looking, but in reality, the cabinet was complete, and the electronics, even more importantly, was just needed a few loose solder joints. The big coils on the back had several shorts in them, so I rewound those. But for the most part, it was complete and working. So
that's worthy of a demo.
yeah, that's right.
Can you
Now,
play
how
it?
many, I'm sorry, go ahead. Do we have a question?
Yeah, Mike, can you play it?
Well, so I say it's working. It plays, but what I find is that you've got you have two aerials, one's volume and one's pitch, and the pitch and it works by movement of your hand, right, or your body. When you find a tone that you want, and then you go to a different tone and come back to where you think that first note was, it varies. So it's not consistent. And I don't know what causes that. If it's a tube that might be, I've checked all the tubes. I'm not sure what's causing that. So
Yeah.
Can I play it? Yeah, I can, but you get a lot of weird notes.
Yeah.
That effect happens to me every time I try to sing.
I hope you're focusing, Mike, on the Star Trek theme as your first thing to learn.
Yeah, well, there's some really neat sci-fi movies from the 50s.
Sure.
Forbidden Planet.
Oh, yes, that's a good one.
Yeah, so they use, and if you read back even on the internet about how the theremin was first used, it was a lot in sci-fi, just because of the kind of the strange tone that it put out.
Yeah, perfect 50s stuff. You can't have a theremin without tying it to his 50s movie.
Yeah,
Star
exactly.
Trek in the later 60s.
Yeah, that's right.
Good vibrations.
Yeah, good vibrations. Well, actually, that wasn't a theremin though. That was a just a little bit different application on a regular organ.
Billy, I was always told it was a theremin. It must be a one of those things that you hear that isn't true.
Yeah, you can actually you can see the actual recording of Good Vibrations on the internet. They'll show you. You can pull it up, and you'll see the guy playing the organ. He's doing a finger thing on some kind of little it may use some of the same. I'm not sure if it will use the same electronics or not, same circuitry, but it's a little different than.
My father actually played the theremin. He was a salesman for them in New York City. I guess it was 20s or whatever, but
Right.
yeah, he actually was on stage giving concerts and stuff.
Oh my goodness.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Fred, do you play?
No, I wish I could get my hands on one.
So, Mike, I had seen when I was browsing around your club website there, I think it was back in the 90s. I don't even know if you're a member of the club yet or not, but there was a meeting where you guys had actually had a sort of like an old time radio dramatization done, and you'd had folks there who were real legitimate old time radio players. And I thought that was very cool. Now, have you guys ever done anything like that again, or was that like a one-time shot?
That was a one-time shot, but we've talked about trying to do something like that. It kind of came up during this COVID thing that, something we could do is try and pull something like that off. A couple of the guys in the club are really getting on in age, but they were World War II veterans flying B-29s.
Wow.
And so there was a couple of the guys wrote a script about flying the B-29 and, a radio play based on that. We had the fortune of having a local disc jockey, radio personality, Rick Crandall. He played on a station here in Denver that played all the oldies, the 30s and 40s. And so he was our MC for this dramatization. And it was pretty cool. Pretty
Well,
cool.
especially we had, real veterans as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if you're ever interested in checking them out, if you visit the California Club, they have this little studio set up. They've bought an old building and kind of making it their museum/meeting facility. And they've done a couple of these, recreations as well, around certain themes or whatnot. I mean, they're just really trying to have fun with it, and anything to get somebody else in the door from another angle. So whether
Yeah.
it's somebody who likes the entertainment, or they like old radio, or whether they're just, they, had some connection to radio broadcasting, anything to get somebody into the door. Because we run into, trying to attract people, basically the core obviously is buying, selling radios, sharing advice and tips, and chatting with each other. We have 2 swap meets a year, and then we have this one much larger event, which draws from the whole Northeast. We have that normally in March. But, so we've tried to, attract folks from the, whether it's the component stereo end of things, a little bit more modern spin on the electronics. But we've had, similar to yourselves, we had a barbecue one year, and one year we had a doo-wop group that actually hung around after one of our meets. And I was never really much a fan of that type of music, but when I watched, a cappella, how much work goes into it, it was pretty cool. And I don't know if they ever bought anything, but they brought a bunch, there was some people there who were there, definite groupies who follow them around. And just, you look around for these different ideas to try to gain interest. I don't know if you've ever had anything more unconventional than, just the traditional annual event that's helped you guys get some more people in the door at these venues you run out there.
Yeah, well, at our show, we try and have, a lot of guys just bring their radio and set it on a table. There's a couple of, there's probably about 4 or 5 different members in our club that take it to the next step. One guy collects transistor radios. He had a large display of the early Japanese transistor radios. And that was really interesting, kind of showing the history from, what is it, the Regency, I guess it was the first, one of the first first radios, TR1. And then how the Japanese kind of took over that whole industry by copying essentially the circuitry on the TR1. And so he had a display of, we've had one gentleman that did a recreation of the Titanic radio room.
That's cool.
So that was pretty cool. For people like me who've never seen anything like that, I mean, it brings a lot of, it fills in a lot of gaps in the history for me.
Sure.
History for me about early radio.
So the Marconi, was it Marconi 11 or 16? I forgot. No, it's 11. It was 11 that was on there on the Titanic, if I remember.
That sounds right.
So he had this. So that's what he did when he did the recreation. He had a Marconi and all.
He made the. Well, I think there's some components. I don't remember exactly if some of the components he remade. So
wow.
But I'm not sure the detail which were original and which were manufactured by him. But it was just a phenomenal display.
Wow,
Very cool.
Great.
We have another guy who collects spy radios from World War II.
Oh,
believe it or not, there's a whole.
There's one every club has one.
Well, we've got one right here.
We're not laughing at you, Mike. We have a fellow who's very keen on that, and
from the suitcase crystal sets, some of the early military sets that. So people specialize in our club will specialize in different areas and show their collection at the show. So it's pretty cool to go to. Well,
we have somebody here. If he ever wants to swap spy radios, Tom, maybe Mike can put you in touch with him.
Yeah, so Neil Galensi is the guy in our club. He also did one on the radio the Code Talkers, the Navajo Code Talkers. So it was very interesting. So
Yeah, I mean, those are all good topics, and I think the thing is, you know, that you have folks in your organization who share those interests. You know, those are our favorites. Just I think no matter who you speak with, you know, because we have our own folks up here who are very interested in that. Tom does Enigma, is a big Enigma fan and Restora, as well as he's done some great presentations. You might want to tell your friend we had a spy radio presentation. It's up in our Zoom archives if you ever
Yes, it
want to
is.
check it out. So
Yes, it is.
pretty cool.
cool.
You know what you might enjoy if you can ever track it down. Somewhere here, I have a book. AWA put out one once that was sort of like their greatest hits of stories. I don't know if they were written, you know, for what publication at the time they were putting out, if it was a special or just in their journals. But there was a great piece on, you know, wireless in the Titanic. I'll have to. It's buried somewhere under a lot of stuff upstairs. Maybe I can at least get you the fellow's name who wrote it, and if you'd probably find it somewhere on the AWA archives. It read like a you know, like a murder mystery. You know, you kind of sat on the edge of your seat. They created a lot of, you know, suspense, and it was very interesting, informative, and it was a good read. You know, it was not
Yeah.
sort of so dry that you kind of turn. And even if you weren't interested in radio, you might want to stay tuned just to what happens in the next couple of pages, because obviously it was a tragic event that really did a lot for, you know, highlighting the importance and kind of spurring the development of wireless, the
Yeah.
RCA marine radio business, huh? So anyway, anybody have any questions for Mike? Do you have anything in the group here? Anybody have questions what he likes to collect, or questions about how they do things out in Colorado that we may not be familiar with back east here? Feel free.
Comment about
Raise your hand.
about the Titanic article. I was the editor of the review at that point, and the article was written by a man named Parks Stevenson, and he has done a great number of articles and is quite involved in various diving expeditions to try and recover some of the radio equipment from the
Interesting.
Titanic.
Very interesting.
What was the
Parks
last name?
Stevenson.
Parks what? Stephen?
Parks Stevenson,
Stevenson.
Parks, and Norman
Mhm.
Stevenson.
Got it. Thank you very much for that. So I've heard that that there is an effort to retrieve equipment from the radio room of the Titanic.
Yes, indeed. The ship is disintegrating rather rapidly, and they want to try and get some stuff out before it's all crushed into a big pile of rust.
Yeah.
It's very controversial, of course, but
Yeah,
it makes some sense.
Yeah, periodically you
night.
seem to see these stories that come up, and you know, obviously there's the gravesite, you know, perspective to the whole ship, but yet then there is this historical preservation and you know, sort of an educational angle that, you know, hopes to not disturb those who passed away, but on the other hand, create some knowledge and history to pass on. So we'll see where it goes, I guess.
Yeah, there's some wonderful Marconi pieces on the bottom of the ocean. And Mike Fair, a member of the New Jersey Club, bought one of those 3 coil detector things and restored it after it had been underwater for over 100 years. Very impressive. Same thing with Enigma machines, of course. People try to grab them out of submarines and restore them.
May I add to this perhaps?
Of course.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, very good. Thank you. I actually saw the article on the internet of the restoration of a radio artifact that was brought up from the Titanic. And when this thing came up out of the ship, it was barely recognizable as a Marconi set, and layers of incrustation and deteriorated wood. And I followed the restoration of that particular radio, and I am just so impressed at what a craftsman, what restorers can do with a piece like that that's been submerged for so many years. It was just fascinating. So hats off to all the restorers of that really wasted equipment.
Yeah.
I mean, just, not that it was Marconi era, but if you just even think about, the United States and the Allies U-boat losses, how much radio stuff, was on all of these different merchant marine ships that is just, and who knows where they are, I mean, maybe someday they'll be discovered, maybe they won't. And that's probably not of the vintage that makes it too highly desirable, but yet again, it is a segment of history. And as time goes by, that becomes a little bit more of an ancient pastime, shall we say, in this hobby.
Mhm.
So Mike, tell us a little bit about your collection. Do you have a specialty? Do you like certain brands, certain eras, certain types of radios? What do you have in your collection right now? How many sets do you have? I mean,
I probably
come clean.
have, I probably around 100. I've had more. I'm trying to whittle it down a little bit, but I kind of like the Zenith, the Zenith line. The highlight would be the Waltons. I have all 5 Walton sets or
Very nice.
variants of them. Tabletops. I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 console sets, but that's kind of my specialty. What else? I got a Spartan over here, Spartan 3-knob. I don't remember the model number, but yeah, it's a all-encompassing hobby. I mean, from the repair of the wood to repair of metal to the electronics. I mean, there's just so many avenues of the hobby that keep me interested.
Now, do you still have that radiola by any chance?
The 18. Yes, as a matter of fact, I do.
Very nice. Now, I don't know if you're in your radio room or not, but are you in a position to show us anything you've got camera-wise, or is that stored somewhere else in your home?
Actually, we're moving. So we just sold our house this week, and most everything is. Thank you. So most everything is packed in the garage. Yeah.
We have to have you back then.
Yeah, the Theremin is downstairs. I'm not taking it out to the garage, but actually, the Walton. A lot of my higher value sets are still downstairs in my radio room.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, will you be devoting one wing of the Mike Cook estate to the radio museum?
Yeah, we're going to rearrange it a little bit. Fortunately, I'm not sure. Yeah, you guys probably have basements up in the Northeast, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So as soon as we get moved in, I've got a plan drawn for the basement. So we're going to get a contractor involved, and it will have some nice display areas for radios.
Very good.
That's good. So it's not a room, it's a wing.
It's a wing. There you go.
That's correct. I mean, we have basements, sheds, barns, crawl spaces. We have many areas that we can cram with our treasures. Some of us more so than others.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, oftentimes they don't lend themselves to display. So that's the problem there. So in any event, anybody else have any questions for Mike this evening?
Hey, Mike, I have a question. Has your club's charter, have you expanded outwards, to is it by default you do like vintage computers, vintage vintage calculators, things beyond just your traditional radios, or?
Yeah, I mean, so at our auction, you'll occasionally see several of the guys here worked for Hewlett Packard. Hewlett Packard has a pretty large presence here in the Front Range, Colorado Springs, Denver, Fort Collins. And you'll see vintage HP equipment. Another guy collects old electric fans. Sometimes those will show up at so it's primarily radio, but then there's every collector has something else besides radios, right?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Well, no, I
Yeah.
think the thing is there, generally, for the prowlers who are at yard sales and flea markets and antique barns, how can you not come across some other stuff that would go nicely? If you, especially some people like to set up little displays around their radios, so they look for other vintage things. And I mean, let's see, today was supposed to be opening day at Fenway Park. I mean, I got off a guy. I mean, if I got it at a baseball show, I probably would have paid $50 to $100 for it. I got a Red Sox pennant that was probably from the 40s for
Oh my.
$5 from a guy at a radio show. So I
Wow.
couldn't say no. Wrapped
Yeah.
up, it was in great shape. I mean, I'm trying to debate whether I should iron it or not, but the felt is a little shaky, but the logo and everything, it's great. And how can you not say, I'll take it?
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
So, but we see, we have a fellow who, one of our past presidents, who was very much into, he'd have anything ranging from, bedside clocks, the moonbeam type clocks, to different types of, transistor radios, advertising displays. Occasionally he'd have a few quack medical devices. You never know what you would find at his table, but he's based up in Maine, and he does a lot of estate clean outs and a lot of hunting on his own. So, they kind of add to the show. I mean, it's something more than just,
Sure.
so, for somebody who wanted to come, who's more of an antiquer, yes, there's a good chance you might find something else that you just have to have.
Yeah.
And then wonder why the heck did I ever buy this thing? But I think that's a consistent theme. Do you see anything more? Do you see more of like do you notice like a dearth? Like if you went out and either at your events or if you were hunting around, do you see more of one type of radio or less? I mean, you guys are kind of, I know Chicago was a big nexus for not only the manufacturers, but shipping both East and West, but yet California had, the Packard Bells and, different companies that you were more likely to find out on the West Coast. And, back East, obviously we find a lot of everything, but a lot of Philcos, and there were some regional manufacturers up here. Do you notice more or less of certain, I mean, was there ever a set you wanted to get that you said, gee, I just don't see them around here that much?
Yeah, Atwater, Kent, there aren't that many.
Yeah.
All together. And then Denver's in a kind of a, you got Chicago on one side, then you've got the West Coast on the other, as far as mega radio collecting sources, if you will. And Denver really had no radio manufacturers to say.
Right.
And so, and it's if you look at it, history, it's really a relatively new town, if you will. It really didn't start taking off until like the 1920s or so, 1930s. So there's just not a lot to draw from. There isn't a lot of inventory of old radios here in estates and that sort of thing. So a lot of guys, I've done it myself, resort to buying things on eBay. Going to other club auctions, for example, caravanning out to Chicago to go to their auctions, or up to Seattle.
And you imagine you have a fair amount of transplants that you hope are bringing all their toys with them.
Yes, that's true too. Yeah.
What kind of, I was kind of curious. I mean, I live near obviously the Atlantic Ocean, so when I was a kid, I was very interested in shortwave, and I was just kind of at the tail end of, a lot of the Eastern Bloc, Radio Moscow, and I could get Radio Tirana, I get all kinds of stuff, and I get stations all up and down the East Coast. You get a certain amount of propagation that's enhanced by the oceans. And what do you guys like if you're listening to broadcast band, or you're just trying to DX the broadcast band in Colorado? Does the topography, do you notice challenges or some stations you just don't get? Or if you're trying to build a little DX book, I mean, would that be harder or easier out your way?
Yeah, I used to try and catch shortwave the mountains really create this barrier, if you will. You don't get much from the West Coast. Chicago is pretty easy to pull in. Some of the flatter terrain, but it's really the dryness of the air here. I'm sure there's some climatic forces that
Sure.
vary substantially that affect our ability to pull in stations, but it's you got to have a pretty good aerial to
Sure.
have any luck at all.
Sure. Do you ever notice anything like north-south, like more likely to pick up Canada or Mexico than?
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
pick up Mexico. I don't speak Spanish, but yeah, you can pick up Mexico pretty easily. I don't remember being able to discern if there was a Canadian station I've been able to pick up, though. I don't remember.
Challenges.
I think Toronto is probably reachable for you, possibly. You know.
Yeah, there's a couple of big state. Well, the 740 out of Toronto, and then there's 900, I believe, out of Hamilton. And I'm just not sure what their patterns are, but I know the 900 station does a lot of old time radio. It's kind of fun at night. I have a hard time getting it here, but 740 from Toronto, and again, I think it's just because it's just beyond the lakes, and sometimes I'll get that like a local. Other times that's it's just lost in the fuzz, so to speak. So
Could
just kind of curious because I know some clubs do these DX contests. I know the New Jersey guys have some, and they draw in some interest. And there are folks who are more active and interested in listening to what they have than actually the hunting and restoring. And to your point, there's the restoration work that gets some people going. There's some people it's the whole package. I want to become a woodworker, an electronics genius, and the best picker on the planet. And then there are other people who would buy them and fix them, but once it's done, they want to move on to the next one, and they'd be glad to sell it to you, as they just always are looking for challenges. So you find all these different personalities around the club. So I can think of a few names to go with those different avenues of interest in our own group. So
you find a lot of AM stations going off air, going out of business. I mean, that's a problem we're having here in the Denver market. It's just it's so competitive with the internet and
conglomerates, and I think what you run into too is there are a lot of things that are it's all syndicated programming. What I would tune in out in Denver is probably a lot of what I would tune in a lot of metropolitan areas. We're kind of fortunate a little bit in that we have some, there are some lower power AMs that do some different types of broadcasting. We have a guy who's self-supported who plays stuff from the 30s through the 70s. He does no commercials, but again, he's 250 watts out of Boston, and I think 2,500 at his station up in Maine. John Gibbons lives next door to Ashland, we had a little station go through some changes recently, and I think they're about 1,000 watts, John, but they've gone over to jazz and sort of some oldies.
Yeah.
So just the fact that we even have some music up here, I'm pretty impressed with. So.
Yeah, that's great. They actually simulcast on FM for those people who've long given up on AM. So, but it's nice just here because you're 100% correct, is that AM is either very uninteresting, and we're lucky enough in this area to get, a couple of diamonds in the rough, that make AM still enjoyable, but otherwise the rest of it is, it is what it is. It's nothing that exciting.
One of the big Saturday night stories up here, and he's 85 years young, is if you've ever heard of Cousin Brucey, who had been on Sirius XM. Well, he got his start back in New York, I'm going to guess in the 50s. And, so Cousin Brucey, as you would imagine, is playing stuff from the 50s on up. He was on Sirius XM. He signed a very large dollar contract to go over to Sirius and leave terrestrial. So how cool is this? So there's a guy in New York City. His name is John Katzimatidis. He made his fortune with groceries. He's in the grocery business. He wrote a check and bought a radio station. in New York, 770, right? It's WABC. And with his sole intention, some people say, though he has put on some other different programs, was to get Cousin Brucey off of Sirius and put him back on terrestrial radio in New York City. Well,
Wow.
he did it. Brucey came back. Apparently they're friends. And, you know, so he's on from about 6:30, 6 in the evening till 10 at night. And, you know, he does requests. He plays all the songs that you would expect. Around 9:30 or so, he slows it down and does all these, you know, 50s, 60s, 70s love songs. I mean, yes, you know, he's an older guy, but he's great with the callers, and he's a phenomenon not only amongst the people who like radio because it's a great test for us and it's good content to listen to, but then there's this just market of people from that era, you know, who are a little older now, who probably might not have an internet radio, but who remember him, you know, very fondly. You know, relates back to their younger days, and you know, how cool is that? So you could probably he streams. So if you ever wanted to check him out some night, you know, just Google Cousin Brucey, New York City. And I know he has a Facebook site as well, but he has these really nice phone calls with the callers and, you know, cousin, I remember you. There's just a lot of nostalgia, but the music is still very good. And the fact that he's 85 and still doing this is just remarkable. And to me, I mean, if I could write a check and buy 50,000 watt radio station, well, I'd have some fun, I tell you. We'd have some interesting programs. But, you know, so to answer your question, yes, it's the iHeartRadio, it's all the consolidation, syndication, and conglomeration that's killing AM. But yet, you know, you look around, you find these little patches of blue. So,
Sure.
you know, a lot of the guys down south still like WSM, and they do some different things. And usually it's the smaller locals that sometimes, you know, you find somebody has a little niche and it's fun to listen to. But again, it's fading quickly. So thus the Bluetooth devices being installed on vintage radios and such. So for better or for worse, so you can get some content in there.
Could I add to that?
I got somebody who starved for music for 20s and 30s. I've discovered something called Radio Dismuke. It's on the internet, and I got that, and because I can't get anything because I'm in the woods here, what I do is I use the low power AM transmitter so I can play 20s and 30s into my radios. Otherwise, I get nothing but static, or maybe a news channel. That's it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, Fred, I don't know if Joe Devonshire is back from dinner yet, or if he's still eating. But he recently popped a post out on the Reflector of a link to an old-time. It's an online source for 30s, 40s, 50s music. But you know, again, if you want to stream it out of your computer into your transmitter, he loves it. You know, and I know a lot of the guys enjoy it quite a bit. So just have to find different things to listen to if you're a listener, but to just turn it on at night and find something that's worthwhile is a challenge.
Yeah.
And it's probably something you run into across the country from what I hear. So.
Yeah, Paul, that's one of the things I shared from the New Jersey Club yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, that was great.
I posted it on the Philco forum because I know a lot of the folks there struggle for content in certain parts of the country. So.
Okay.
How is the stew?
Very, very good. Looking forward to more tomorrow, probably Saturday.
It's the
Mark,
gift that keeps on giving, right? Make a big batch.
Could I add to this discussion about AM radio deaxing?
Yes.
Having grown up like all of us on vintage radio, old hand-me-down shortwave radios, pretty much radio has been a part of our lives that are into it since we were kids. Receiving my first radios from the dump, and in rare cases getting them going, crystal radios. But once I got into amateur radio, I do recognize that the absolute best AM DX listening can be had using the front end of an amateur radio receiver on the AM wavelengths with a tuned long wire. Now, I have two. I have a vertical and I got a long wire that dips into 160 meters. So it's ideal for deaxing. So any of you that really want to get out there and catch some AM airwaves, find an old ham radio and put it on the air with a 160-meter antenna. That's it.
Good
Thanks,
thought.
Mark. You know, I don't know if I've ever shared this in this particular forum, but so when I was associated with this little station over in Cambridge and did the old time radio program, or the antique radio collector program. So, you know, it was a real, I felt as if I had walked into a sitcom because, you know, it's brokered radio over there. The guy he's the producer, he's the money collector, he's the scheduler. He's got to run people around into the different studios. For people like me who needed some radio production help, well, you know, he does that. He does everything. So, you know, he's really a one-arm paper hanger over there, and he's trying to keep this place together and on the air. So occasionally, you know, but they get, you know, periodically they would get these, you know, they get emails. They get people who have, you know, have questions, this, that, and the other thing. So he assigned me this job. I guess I was probably paying him back for a lot of the technical help he had to give me. He would send me these emails, and they were people looking for essentially an email QSL, if you will. And so we would get a lot from, now this was I think daytime, it was 28,000, maybe we were 13 or 14 at night. I don't really recall, but it's AM. So he was getting, he'd get emails from Belgium, Spain. We would occasionally get them from, you know, we'd get them from Finland, we'd get them from Sweden. So we'd always have these discussions, you know, is this going out over across, you know, the Atlantic? Is it going over the poles? You know, how are these people listening to this stuff? So, you know, my job was to say, oh, thank you for your report. And people would attach a little MP3 file to show that they were listening over the air to some of the programs on the station. So you get a program name, or you get the station call letters, et cetera. So I would thank them. I might ask them a little bit about, you know, their rig, or how, you know, what do they do? You know, they have other interests in radio. So a few of these guys would get back to me. And some of these guys, this is just amazing to me, but maybe if you're from Finland, this is what you do. You know, they would go way up into the hinterlands, and they would set up these long antennas on the snow, long wire antennas. They would sit in a hut, you know, like a heated hut, and, you know, maybe they would do some hunting, they would do snowshoeing. But one of the things was at night is they would tune around and try to listen. I can only imagine how cold it is. I mean, what are you doing in 2 weeks at a time? I couldn't believe some of the stories they would tell me. Oh, this is great fun. But then again, you know, I'm not from Finland, you know, but there are these folks who go to great lengths, and whether they're driven by sort of this, you know, technical desire to see what can I pick up, or they're just, you know, they've got the DX bug so bad they're willing to go up and down there, freeze to death. But, you know, it was fascinating stuff. And I had no idea that people were doing these types of things, because I don't know if I was to advertise we were going up into the hinterlands of Canada for a DX expedition, that I get too many people from our club that would sign up on these things. But so yes, they do it. And I think, to Mark's point, is they're probably using, one of the guys was using communication types equipment, and he was telling me what he would do. He would drive stakes into the snow, and he'd walk the wire antenna back and forth. And he said, oh, I sometimes will use several hundred feet, and we'll see what's on that night. And, you know, some of the quality of some of these little clips they were sending, I have to tell you, was not that bad. I mean, it was pretty good stuff. So, you know, again, there's, you know, all these little different subcultures in our hobby, and that's a unique one. But, you know, I don't know that I'd be willing to go up and hang out with the elk to DX. Anyway, any other comments, questions, reactions, topics?
Maybe I'll throw one more question out Mike's way, is you know, the struggle we have, like every club in this country, probably throughout the world, is, you know, does anyone from the younger generation actually show any interest, and how do you get them in, reel them in, and keep them interested? And any thoughts in your neck of the world?
The millennials, you know, they're just not interested in antiques. I don't know how you get them. My son, he's been around me his entire life. He knows I collect, you know, any old stuff. He just has no interest in it. And I think that's prevalent through that age group. No, I don't know. We have I'd say maybe 40-ish is the youngest I can think of off the top of my head, member in our club.
Well, that's pretty good.
Did you meet a person named in Colorado Springs, a person named Albert Craig? He was active until whenever it was that he died. And he was active in trying to get the Boy Scouts into antique radio. That was the hobby that he had when he moved to Colorado Springs. Have you heard of him?
I have not heard of him, although we have members that have gone, go to like a Cub Scout, Boy Scout meeting, take, the razor blade, pencil lead, coil radio, make a radio.
Yeah.
And so that makes a little interest in them. But no, I don't think we have anybody doing that anymore. No,
I think there used to be a badge that you would get as a scout that was a radio oriented badge, and I'm not even sure if they have that anymore. So
Foxhole Crystal Set, that's the name I was looking for.
I'm not sure if they do it any longer, but there was actually a small private school here in the greater Boston area that had a radio club, and this was within the last 10 years. I was shocked when I saw this thing online, but I don't know what happens to them after they get whatever their grade is and they move on. They just don't seem to be coming to our events. I think Bruce had a question. Yes, Bruce.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mike, does your club have any real estate? Do you have a place where you meet? Do you have storage facilities or a lab where you can work on things, or what do you do out there?
Great question. No, we use the public library in Castle Rock as our meeting place. It's a brand new facility, and they generously let us use their facility. But several of the club members have very nice collections, and we've talked about somehow trying to create a museum. But as you know, it takes capital to obtain and do the maintenance on it over time. So that's a good question, though. Do you all have real estate? Do you have a dedicated museum?
No, we would like one. Well, one of our challenges, of course, is we're scattered among 6 New England states, and then throw in some additional states like Arkansas with David Spivey here. So trying to find a place that we can all our closest approximation would be something like New Hampshire, but a lot of us would have to travel at least an hour just to get there. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Like separation. That's why the Zoom meeting works well for us, because it's almost a force of nature. It was almost fortunate. I don't want to say it that way that COVID happened, because we should have done this years ago, right? And
yes,
we can, because I look at the people here. I've got we have people in New York, Vermont, Massachusetts. I know I saw Connecticut a little while ago, Maine. So we have a wide distribution of membership. But believe me, I know when I see other club members show up, like the California Historic Radio Society or the Alabama Club, boy, am I jealous. They have a beautiful site.
Hey, John, but to give it its due respect, Connecticut has got a very good museum.
They do.
Is that the
AWA? I'm sorry?
Is that the American Wireless Museum?
No. There's the ARRL, American Radio Relay League in Newington, Connecticut. And they used to have a museum in their lobby, but they took it down about 20 years ago and put it in storage and put up a sign that said to be returned shortly. And it's not been there. But no, in Windsor, Connecticut, it's the Connecticut
Vintage Communications.
Thank you. And they, they seem to be doing well. They've moved up through about 3 buildings over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And they're in, I would guess, about a 10,000 square foot building. and they've got nice displays of stuff. They've done an excellent job of displays, and they hold flea markets about 3 times, 4 times a year, and sell tubes and things like that. So,
Yeah,
and they have quite an eBay business too. They put a lot of stuff on eBay.
Yeah.
That's been
Now,
donated.
how, Carl, if I could ask, I don't expect you to be their controller, but do you know, other than maybe what they sell on eBay and, the little tube shop and all, do you know what their primary funding mechanism is? Is it donations for people coming through, or do they have like benefactors?
I don't know. That's a good question. When I first got involved with them, when I lived in Connecticut, they were in an old like grocery store in East Hartford. But I think they were getting that rent free, as I recall. But I believe they bought the building they're in now, which looks like it was a former office or maybe small manufacturing facility. It's a nice setup.
They're having a flea market on Saturday, 2 days.
As I remember, they funded a lot of, they had a lot of donations. When John set up the museum years ago, they had just a lot of people looking for a place to get rid of their old electronics, because there's a lot of people who aren't interested. And they said, great, now I have this place to donate, because they had more stuff they could take. But point being is that they auctioned, sold, and did a lot to help finance their museum, and they're able to move rather inexpensively in a relative scheme of things, given it's the Northeast, from building to building to where they're at. Now, I'm not sure how they fund things today, but I know their history. John sort of gave a nice discussion some years ago on that. I was pretty impressed how they just, a lot of it self-funded by donations of just equipment. But but it is a great museum. For me, it's like, I could be there in an hour, but it is from the New England representation. It's on the southern side of things. It's just our club ourselves, we don't have a building dedicated to the New England Vintage Electronics Club that we would love to have, but it's a challenge for many reasons, as you pointed out, really.
So just to fill you in on what we do, Mike. So we have 2 smaller events. They're more club-oriented events. We have swap meets. We have one in the spring and one in the fall. So we actually rent, and we pay that, through over-the-door fees for people who come in. It's called the Brookline Convention Center, Meeting Center. It's a small hall, and people use it for local meetings. It's a wedding venue, that type of thing. But the layout is nice. They have a very large parking lot that lends itself to. We'll have a tailgating section for people, and we'll also have the indoor section. And the tailgating was nice because when we did have a meet where we were social distancing and masking and all, I think a lot of people felt more at ease outside the building. But on a nice day, it's great to be able to go through the tailgating area, and then you can go inside, where some people, if they're a little more concerned about weather or what they're bringing, they want to have a cover, or they wish to have some AC available to them, that type of thing. And so we do them. They're very good to us. They supply us with a little help to kind of work the parking lot, and they make a few bucks off of us. They run a small concession stand up front, so they're pleased with what they do for us, so that works. And then we also rent actually a hotel ballroom, basically, for our bigger events. So that's more bucks, but generally we get more people in over the door on that. And we were very fortunate in that, I think it was March 5th, pre-COVID, we had our last, COVID was just kind of lurking as this beast. And we snuck in probably the largest group we ever had at radio. And, it was a great time. Everything went off well. There was an awful lot of stuff. So, we'll go through these discussions when we say, well, the hobby's graying and we don't get, we wish we could do more to boost attendance. And then we were pretty full up, for that one. But, we did see some younger people, but again, I think it's more casual traffic. They don't seem to be joining up and, paying their dues and joining our Zooms. But that's where we're at. So we essentially work, New Hampshire kind of works for us, Southern New Hampshire. We can draw up Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Mass, and it's not too bad for the folks up in northern New England to get down. And they give us a special rate at the event we do have that's hosted at the hotel. Somebody wants to come and spend the night, chat, have something to drink or eat with the gang before the event. So they'll give us a little break there. So you can be ready to go first thing if you had a long drive. And the March event usually gets folks from as far away as New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. So we get a good group, you know, they all come up.
That's great. That's great. So your club is more, do some of that like New Jersey, is there a separate club in New Jersey or does everybody
Yes.
kind of work? There is?
Yep, New Jersey is a very active group. They are the Zoom Kings. There's one fellow down there I know who's active in a lot of. He does some of the. He does daily, early mornings. You know, like 2 o'clock Zooms. He'll do earlier Zooms. They have their own weekly presentations. They were putting stuff on YouTube for ages. They've been, you know, creating their own archives and all. So they have a good membership and a lot of people who are willing to put in some time. So. You know, because we bat back and forth occasionally, how much Zooming is too much Zooming. You know, we have a little amateur radio net that gets run with some of the guys who are amateurs in our group that meet once a week. So it's, you know, you have events as long as, you know, people will come and find it of interest. But yes, so New Jersey's very active. They also have a great physical presence in what's called InfoAge, which is sort of this modern history museum, actually near a Marconi site. I think it's in a Marconi facility, or what once was. And InfoAge's mission is to sort of pass along technological knowledge to future generations. So they have a presence, obviously, which, you know, antique television, radio, that type of thing. So they do a nice job with that. So, you know, it's interesting as we've talked to people from different clubs, you know, we find everybody has something different that seems to work for them. And when we had the guys on from Alabama, it was just, I was like meeting somebody in a boardroom. They somehow managed to get a great deal going with the Public Power Authority down there. They give them space in their building for a library. They give them all types of space in one of their public buildings. And again, for them, this is how they sort of, you know, they have as a corporate mission, they have to give back a certain amount to the community and all. Well, what better way to find somebody who wants to work with you than people who are into, you know, electronics, because obviously they're our best customers. But even the power company down there at one point in time had set up one of the first radio stations in Alabama. So it was interesting to meet with those guys too and see how they do it. And they have a huge boneyard down there with all kinds of part sets, and you know, it's you know, I'd go on a tour of any of these places, but you know, every area has their own formula that seems to work. Up here, real estate's quite expensive.
Sure,
it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard. In different parts of the country, it might be easier. I know the California Club was close on closing on a building they wanted to buy that was an abandoned station. And the company that owned it pulled the rug out on them. So then they said, we'll just buy our own building. And they went off and bought an old phone company building up in Alameda. But, you know, so it's what it is. And the nice thing about the Zooms is we've been able to interact and find out what works for different people. And we also have been able to envy them from a distance.
Yeah.
But I mean, the likelihood of us touring all these facilities is probably pretty slim. Maybe on our individually someday if you happen to be in those cities or towns, you know, that host them. But it's been a great way to see what works for them.
The Antique Radio Club in New Jersey, at InfoAge, we have a museum with radio and television. There's a lot of stuff. So if you ever get down our way, come and visit.
I would
you
love
ever get
to.
back
Thank
east for business or anything, Mike? Do you ever get back east at all? Or you pretty much?
Well, I used to travel extensively for AT&T. Unfortunately, it's, you know, you never have enough time.
Sure.
But I did
I
did hit a lot of antique stores, and you know, that was always a top priority in my free time.
Yeah, you see a lot of inside of airports and hotels and meeting rooms.
That's right.
Maybe not so much of antique shops and
that's right.
And radio
That's right.
museums. No, I understand. Yeah, I traveled a little bit. It was usually too much of a whirlwind. You used to get home, you want to go to sleep after 4 days on the road. But people say, "Oh, that's great. What did you do?" And well, I worked for 4 days. You know?
Yeah.
And flew 6 times.
Yeah.
Gotta go. I got a net to be on. See you guys.
All right. Take care.
Hey, thanks, Fred.
Well, we usually run these things for about an hour and a half or so. We'll go around if anybody had any more questions, comments, or reactions for Mike, and then we'll look at wrapping things up for tonight. What's the best beer in the Colorado mountains, Mike? This is a non-radio question for you.
Oh,
Yeah, there we go.
Fat Tire,
Oh,
Breckenridge
yeah.
Brewery.
Is that brewed locally to you?
It's Fort Collins. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. I remember now. I was trying to remember where it's brewed. Yeah, that's quite good. That's good beer.
Yeah, it's good
Very
beer.
good beer.
But
So we
you know,
we can get that here.
yes, we
Yeah,
can. But
it's nationwide, I think.
I was trying to see if it'd say Coors, but I know it's kind of an
No,
institution
no.
out there, but it's kind of like the Budweiser of Colorado.
that was too dark for Coors and the glass I was seeing.
Yeah.
But Mike, I hope we'll be able to get you back when you're settled into your new home, so maybe you can give us a tour.
Give us
your
a brief
toys.
tour.
Oh, I would love to. I would really love to. That'd be a lot of fun. Yes.
Yeah, so
And you-
I think we all of us want to see 5 Waltons, see that theremin. So it gives a little bit of a sci-fi show here.
Yep. You bet.
You know,
You're
Maybe we
always
can
welcome
even
to
invite
come
a
to
couple
any
of your
meetings.
other members, and they can show us some of their stuff. We'll have a few
absolutely.
of you guys stop by.
absolutely.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Have you back.
Or certainly let him come to our meetings.
I'd love
that's
to.
true. That's true.
Is this where we pass the basket and put $2 in?
We only accept Bitcoin, Carl. So we'll see. Hopefully, all of our guys, or most of them, our next event is coming up in May at the Brookline Event Center in New Hampshire, and the weather can be fickle here, so we're keeping fingers crossed and hope it's nice. I mean, people are getting a little crazy. Even myself, I start to look at eBay a little too much. You get cabin fever when you can't get out to a swap meet or an in-person event. And it is nice to see and touch and talk and not have to worry about somebody, shipping a nice radio wrapped up in a couple of pieces of the Sunday paper in an oversized box, 2,400 miles, because there's no place we want to go. So in any event, all right, I'm through if you guys are too.
Yeah, no, it was great.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks again, Mike.
Oh,
We
well,
appreciate
thank you
it.
so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's
We
great.
enjoyed it. Good luck with the move and everything in the new house.
Oh, thank you very much. Really
You'll be
appreciate
ready
it.
You want
you'll
us
be
to come
ready
out
for
and
cold
help this
one.
weekend? You need help
Yeah.
this weekend?
Because we're all
the help
tied
I
up.
can get.
Help move, take home a radio.
And we'll get you down to about 50. We'll thin the herd for you.
There you go. There you go.
Thanks again.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Mike.
Good night, all.
Thanks, Mike.
Hi, everybody.
care, guys.
Enjoy your weekend.
Bye-bye.
Happy
Bye-bye.